Most common mistake people do playing poker is that they fold too much versus small bets on the big blind. I have seen this many times coaching my students, and big blind versus button is one of the most common spots that you will encounter playing tournament poker. For that reason, I have created this video to show you how to play, how to defend versus small bet sizes whenever you're on the big blind. This is a spot which creates a lot of EV if you get it right. So here's how you can increase your win rate from the big blind. Let's start off with button opening range. So button is opening offsuit 8x, suited 5x, suited Broadway, and offsuit ace-6, king 6-0, and pairs, right? So this is opening range. So if you go to the big blinds range, at 30 big blinds, it's very interesting in that sense. Like, we will be 3-betting most of our ace-6 away, right? So if you look over here, this is going to be going in. Bears are going to go in. So we can't flop a set. We don't flop good pair of aces on ace-high boards. So it's just something to keep in mind at 30 big blinds, big blinders button. This is how our pre-flop plays. So let's move on to button as a big blind. We're going to look at facing small bet from a button. So in general, these type of spots, you want to defend about 40 to 45% in general, because you can't really go ahead and fold overly too much, even though this is already folding a lot, considering like your range is very wide and you need to defend somehow the MDF, right? Or like this is like overfolding MDF by a large margin. So if you go into looking at high card hands, and see over here, mostly at 30 big blinds, because we are 3-betting so much ace-6 away pre-flop, you do see that on ace-high boards, our fold is actually at 30 big blinds going really skyrocketing to 53%, which is kind of crazy. Also, something to mention is we don't check raise that much on ace-high boards. It's still like solid 11%, but it doesn't really happen that much. So our average check raise should be 17-18%, right? But you can see ace highs at 30 big blinds, not much of a thing. Rest boards, it's like 18, 19, 20. Like, you see a lot of check raising, but ace high boards, because we don't really have that much value, you're not really supposed to be check raising as much, right? So all in all, these are our defending frequencies, which going to be kind of what you want to see. So if you look at your database and your fold to c-bet on the big blind is more than 45, you probably overfolding. Should be tightening up. In general, could be that you're defending wider than this pre-flop range over here. So let's get some hands in. This was just to quickly run down your frequencies. So over here, we have prepared the big blind versus button facing small c-bets from the button. So 5 deuce. What would you do here? Because in general, button's range is so wide that we need to defend this, right? It's very difficult to not defend. Also, we did see a high frequency check raise, so in general, bear boards are very high frequency check raise. I believe it's going to be around like 25 to 30% in general. Typically, I would assume we want to have a spade over here to go a check raise. On these low board bear boards, you typically want to play a little bit more as a call with like your broadways, and you want to check raise more like when you have 9-6 with a 9 of spade, 8-6 with a spade, jack 4 with the jack of spade, because those are backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw hands. So we're gonna go ahead and call. Let's go and see the flop strategy before we're going to continue playing the turn. So we can see over here, first of all, something to mention in general, bear boards as an in-position player typically want to bet 1 big blind, not 1/3. That's just typically, but we're gonna check this one. So if we look over here, our 5x, so whenever you have a pair of fives and a good kicker, it just likes to check raise, right? A lot of, like, most of the deuce x just wants to check raise. So drips, you check raise. 5x, you mostly check raise. Keep in mind, again, we don't have any pairs. We did not call any pairs pre-flop, so we don't have that. We don't have any good ace-x, but we need to defend somehow. Like, this is still folding almost 40%, right? So you need to defend your kinda king highs, queen highs, and jack highs with a spade. So you would have a backdoor flush draw to go with it. Even then 9 mixes in, right? And your check raising will come on a weak from the weaker board. I would have guessed, like, yeah, it's still kind of a lot. Like, mostly these that will interact as a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. So whenever you have jack 3 with the jack of spade, you're gonna have a backdoor flush draw, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gives you straight, or ace to 5. And with the jack of spade, you have a flush draw as well, backdoor flush draw as well, right? So you do want to defend these as a check raise more, because they're not going to do very well as calls in general. You do see like king 6 with the king of spade don't mind, because you have do-overs to the board, don't mind calling, but like rather these like smaller ones mostly just check raise, like 6, 7, 8, 6. Not always. Keep in mind these are still like mixing, like 8-7. Again, you're mixing with the 8 of spade, and it does really like very aggressive, almost 30% check raise. So typically this plays like 50-50 kind of type. Sometimes you will see more calling, sometimes you will see more raising. Against I believe against one big blind you would see a little bit more calling happening, and against 1/3 you see more like 50-50-ish strategy in general. So let's move on. Do we have any leads over here? That would be my first question, because it feels like it interacts with our range, but does it? So if you go back over here, this type of equity around 3-4, this is mostly check raising, right? So it doesn't really connect with our pre-flop calling or flop calling range. So I'm gonna assume it's just mostly a check over here, and we're going to go for a check line over here. So it goes check check. So 9 on the river. Now the question would be, should we bluff, right? Because this is like one of the worst hands, right? If you go back to the flop, keep in mind we're pretty much with this range on the river, right? So if all of this defended by check raise, this check raise, right? 9 hit. Keep in mind 9 hit the bear, right? So jack 10 queen jack are becoming like kind of bottom. I guess you could make argument that you're still you get to bluff all of like hands you called that missed on the river, like 8-6 of hearts and this stuff. But for the most part, I think we probably need to fire a bluff over here, because we are kinda on the bottom. As of size, I'm gonna imagine it doesn't really matter. Typically, out of position player gets to choose multiple sizes. Whenever you play out of position, it's just like basically big one. So because I do think we do have some type of showdown value when we check, I would assume we just go to like on a smaller side. Don't really have 5x. Like the big problem over here is we don't really have much value though. We do have 9x that would probably want to size up. We do have a couple of flushes, but other than that, I don't think we will see very high frequency bet on the river. So I'm gonna go ahead and like, let's fire this one. I'm not sure if this is going to be correct, and we got the fault. So looks like we made inaccuracy on the river. So let's take a look. So if we go to look up on the turn, so 3 of spade, we don't really have a leading range. Again, as I said, we don't really connect with it too well over here. And the river was 9 of hearts, right? So it is 50% betting. It is 50% betting. A little bit more often than I would have thought. But I guess we're still gonna have, because we have so many offsuit 9x, I guess that's the kind of the reason. If you look over here, kind of have like second pair plus is really huge part of our range actually. So yeah, that makes sense. Like even third pair, like we do have some 3x that also wants to bet. So queen jack is still like has a showdown value. That's why it's not being really used as a bluff. And over here we can see we're not really sizing, like we, as I said, we're going to use, first of all, we're going to use all different sizes, right? So it doesn't really matter as much. One thing to say, if I go for a bet over here, should probably, because I have a flush blocker, even though it would like to use probably a better blockers in general, like king of spade, it does make sense to size even bigger. And yeah, I don't think it's like a mistake or anything. It's just like, what size would you go with a 9x? And based on that, I choose the sizing I chose. So this is a simple one. We're just going to fold, and let's move on to the next one. So over here, we have a very interesting one with us having queen 5 with a 5 of spade. We have a gut shot. It's a small board, so in position players shouldn't connect that well over here. It's very hard to see that we're going to go ahead and fold a gut shot over here. But so I'm gonna go with the call over here. Wouldn't shock me to see some check raising happening here as well. So we're gonna call, and we can already like go and open it up. What's going to happen over here? So if you look our defending strategy on the flop, whenever we have a 5, we do fold gut shots if we don't have backdoor flush draw. Whenever you have backdoor flush draw, it does want to kind of check raise. Overall, our check raising strategy is very aggressive over here. It's about like 18% check raising with a flop jamming coming in with a king 8 specifically. Some 6-4 with a 1 spade. So this type of spots, it's you can see, as we saw earlier, you are defending actually a lot over here because everything connects. Like all the small cards connect with this type of a board, and like a high cards, well, you have two high cards, right? You have backdoor flush draw with king queen, king jacks. You need to defend just 2 overs. You do have a blockers for in case somebody is value betting over pairs over here to this size, right? So this is going to be fine to defend. Over here with a 4, so we are not, if you go back over here, we are not really check raising a 4x, right? And we do have offsuit 4x in our range. And if you go to in positions range, mostly checks a 4, right? So 4 should give us a leading range. We do have, in position does have flushes in the range, so there is no sizing up probably, because only like typical rule if you want to size up is you have high equity hands and your opponent don't, right? Meaning if in position player is capped, let's say doesn't have trips, doesn't have flushes, doesn't have like best hands are basically top pair. In that case, everything that is better than top pair, you can kind of start sizing up and polarizing your betting over here. But this type of like a flush coming in, I would assume over here that we are going to mostly lead to a small size. It's going to probably want to bet this quite often. So we can go with the smallest size over here with that. So now we're facing a do bet over here, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of small. We do have flush draw. We do have gut shots. But I don't think this is good enough to continue. We do have a straight flush draw though. But still, I think this is just going to go into a muck over here. Because even if you if we think about his value range, what does imposition value bets here? Probably like good 8x plus is mostly calling. I can see that being in the value though. So let's assume it's 8x plus, right? We don't really have that many outs against 8x. Like if it's no spade, sure, we have kind of few outs. I think without the spade is going to raise the 8x mostly. So the spade is not going to be an out for the most part. 6 can be an out though, but it's just four combos, right? So that said, I think this is just purely going to fold. We will check on that. So if you go for a call, it was four of spade. Just to check our leading strategy. Queen 5, like this type of 5x do lead high frequency, a little bit sizing to 50%. We do have 15% trips and 5% flushes. So if we can just go to this line just to check like how often in position player has a drips plus. It's just like 10%. Yeah, whenever it's 10%, it's starting to be very hard to start sizing up too much, but there is a little bit. We do have equity advantages as well as out of position player, not a big one, this small one, but we do have a slight equity advantage. But mostly our leads comes because we have high equity hands, and in position player is a little bit capped over here. So once in position player raises, so we can see over here it does in fact with 8x with a spade like mixes in quite a bit of raises, which is kind of expected. You can't really stack off with out a spade if you raise, but ace 8, like king 8, this also makes sense. Basically your strongest 8x. Even overpairs don't really do it. So if you go over here, it's mostly flushes, straights, flushes, full houses, little bit trips, not much overpair, but highly it's still like top pair. So once we face this, like the idea is like this is very small, right? You can't really, like in position player can't really go for a big two bet size over here with 8x because out of position player is still uncapped. So if you look over here, like does mix in some with the queen high flush draws, that makes sense. Yeah, like if you have queen or king high, you do beat some flushes in those cases. Very interestingly, it don't mind to bluff jam jack 5 10 5 with a spade. I don't think that is something you find every day, to be fair, or like it's not jamming, right? It's just kind of clicking it back. So if you go ahead and look even like this is a very interesting line. Even 8x, like ace 8, like without the spades, you kind of wrecked, so to speak, right? So you do get to a point where you're indifferent, but typically you just want to think like as an in position player. So talking about a little bit in position player, if out of position is raising drips plus, then that means your top pair is a bluff catcher, right? It is on the turn, but it's basically, you can think of that as that hand is a bluff catcher. So that's always something to pay attention to. What is a bluff catcher, what is not. So if bluff catcher is something that does not beat your opponent's value bets. So let's move on to the next hand over here. So over here, ace high board. This again, if you guys remember, high frequency fold. I think we're going to go ahead and defend that one. This one is another high frequency fold in general, but we can still continue there, but not with that one. So over here, ace high, 9 6 3. Should we defend this one? Would you guys defend? It's interesting because I think with the spade, it seems very difficult to not defend. I do think with heart and club, you probably just give it up though, which is 100% correct. But yeah, if you have a spade, so typically the thinking against small bet sizes should be whenever you have backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, those need to very likely to mix in as a defend. So a7, it does defend a little bit, mostly folds, but it does I would say it's kind of 50-50. You get like, this is one thing, don't get you got up is like blockers. Oh, it defends, it doesn't like this one, but it does this one. So I wouldn't say this is like much of a big thing to pay attention to, especially if you start just starting with solvers and stuff like that. So king 7, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, you do defend. Again, these are often going to be a check raises. Something to maybe mention in general is you're more happy to raise offsuit backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draws rather than suited. If you go through a lot of solutions, it does happen more on the flop where you choose offsuit hands to go with that. The suited ones, they do check raise as well. Just I would say not as much. So very interesting one over here. Another one is like whenever you have a 9 at 30 big blinds, you are kind of running it, right? You check raising very high frequency your top pair, and you don't care. Like, let's say in position player are going to go all in over here. Your 9x is getting indifferent, but you're still like, I need to call it off. Keep in mind something though, your opponent needs to have bluffs, right? So if you look at this range, it's top pair bluffs and ace highs, king highs, no made hands. So there are definitely bluffs need to be there. Otherwise, you can't really call off. You can already see over here. Then 9-0 is indifferent. Like it's just getting indifferent. And if people are missing bluffs, your indifferent is 0 EV. And if they're missing bluffs, then it's not 0. You're gonna lose more often, meaning you should not continue with those. So let's move on to next one. Jack 5-0 on this one. Very simple. Cool. Ace-6 with an ace of spade. Are we supposed to be defending here? So my thinking would be no. But we can quickly go and check. By the way, if you guys are interested in GTO Wizard, check the link in below. I am affiliated with them. So over here, we can go ahead and see that small a6 with the ace of spade does not defend. You do need a backdoor straight draw to go with the defend, right? That is very typical that you will see. All the bears like gut shots, not all the gut shots. Gut shots like this small king x. These gut shots also need backdoor flush draw to go with. So just something to keep in mind. Queen X is open ender, rest is pairs, like yada, like not that interesting, kind of simple. So over here, I don't think this one will defend, but maybe this is something where people might go wrong a little bit. So just to show you guys, on ace-high boards, you do have high frequency folds, right? But this is rainbow. So whenever you have even like 9 of clubs, the backdoor flush draw. This, like, I often see people are actually overfolding these backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw hands over here, and they don't really like think about it that much. Like if you have queen 5, you have backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, queen 5 of hearts, right? So you kind of need to defend this. Otherwise, what happens here? You're not folding 50, you're folding 80, right? These are your defense. You need to find this, like 9-5, like your worst, like low backdoor flush draw, backdoor gotchas. These are not really defending as much, but like for some of you, it's probably very surprising to see like 10-6 of hearts going ahead and backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, finding in a defend, right? So you want to really like, if anything, that is like your most like important thing to think of: backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. Facing small bets, those are most likely going to be in your defending range, at least at the frequency. Not all of them, not all the time, but for the most part, if you always fold that hand category, you are probably overfolding. So over here, this is a simple fold. A7, simple. Is this a simple fold though? Is it? Actually, this might be a defend, right? You don't really have that many cards to defend, and we saw earlier. So I think this is probably mixing into a defending range. Let's go with the fold though. Yeah, it's probably a mistake. It's pure defend there. It's just like these rainbow boards. It's just because like your big blind's defending range, like it's a small frequency defend, right? But as a big blind on the rainbow board, you're gonna end up with so many suited offsuit hands, and like you need to defend somehow, right? Over here, you do have a lot of like gut shots and straight draws. and obviously because you have suited hands, you can see like king deuce, even jack deuce, like backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, the worst ones, you do still go ahead and start defending these, like jack 6, jack 7. I do think a lot of people would miss these mixes. Keep in mind, often these like backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, especially if they are like your bottom, they're very often like mixing heavily to fold as well. So you want to be mindful of that. But like 6-7, like if you never thought of defending this, well, you probably should, because like you don't want to overfold, and it's the easiest way. If you have a database, go check what is your big blind fold to c bet. If it's over 45, you most likely missing some of this stop process I have talked about, and like you probably missing some of these zones. I do think like 6-7 and 6-4 with the backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, these are not the easiest ones to find. Like 4-3, like what is this, right? Like most people autofold this, but because it's backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, that's why you want to have that mentality that, hey, I really need to defend these as well. So keep that in mind, and check out the other videos. We're gonna go it over here and see you there.